Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Stench of Truth radio show here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. I'm here every Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where I have guests who talk about very interesting subjects, and tonight will be no exception, of course. I'm very pleased to have Gary A. David as my guest today. Of course, I'm your host, Ted Torbich. You can also find me on YouTube as well if you're interested, under the username TENEBROUST, Tenebrous T. And today my guest is Gary A. David, and you can find him on the web at theorionzone.com, and that's all one word, and it's just like it sounds, TheorionZone.com. And I'm going to read a brief bio that is posted there on theorionzone.com, and tell you a little bit about Gary David. Gary A. David is an independent researcher and author who has been intrigued by the American Southwest since his initial trip there in 1987. The following year, he lived for about 6 months in northern New Mexico, where he studied archaeological ruins and rock art. In 1994, he moved to Arizona and began an intensive study of the ancestral Pueblo people, sometimes incorrectly referred to as the Anasazi, and their descendants, the Hopi. In 2006, after more than a decade of fieldwork and scholarly inquiry, his nonfiction book, The Orion Zone, Ancient Star Cities of the American Southwest, was published. This volume describes a pattern of Hopi villages and ruin sites that precisely mirrors Orion, with an ancient site corresponding to each major star in the constellation. The sequel, released in early 2008, is titled Eye of the Phoenix, Mysterious Visions and Secrets of the American Southwest. In autumn of 2010, the third book in the series, called The Kivas of Heaven, Ancient Hopi Star Lore, was published. All three books are available from Adventures Unlimited Press, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and unfortunately no longer at Borders, but if they were still in business, it would be, and fine bookstores everywhere. So let's see, he has some additional material as well, which you might find useful. He has articles and interviews that have appeared in Ancient American, Atlantis Rising, Fate, Four Corners, Schagenhafte Zeiten, which is Eric von Daniken's Legendary Times, World Explorer, and UFO magazines. One of Gary's essays was also published in Lost Knowledge of the Ancients, a Graham Hancock reader. Mr. David earned a bachelor's degree in arts from Kent State University and a Master of Arts in the Literature of the American West and Creative Writing from the University of Colorado. He has worked as an adjunct professor of English and creative writing, a traveling ambassador for the South Dakota Arts Council, and a professional lead guitarist and vocalist. Gary is also the author of a number of poetry books, including A Log of Deadwood, a postmodern epic of the South Dakota Gold Rush, and Tierra Zia, Poems and Petroglyphs from New Mexico. And without any further ado, I'll bring Gary on the line. Gary, are you with us?
Yes. Hello, Ted. Good to be here.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I had mentioned to you earlier, when we talked briefly before the show started, it's easy to see once someone does a little bit of research into the Native American peoples and their history and the knowledge that they had, how one could become fascinated with this. Perhaps you can give us a little bit of a sort of nutshell view of how you came to be interested in looking into the ancient mythology and lore of the Native Americans.
Sure. I've lived here in northern Arizona for about 16 years or so. Before that time, I lived in South Dakota, and I taught on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And I started working with the Lakotas, too. And I met a woman named Charlotte Black Elk, and she's the great great granddaughter of the famous Black Elk who wrote the book Black Elk Speaks. And at the time, she was talking about a star map that she had on a buffalo hide, and how this star map related to various places in the Black Hills. There was a whole kind of ritual mythology developed around this, what she called a great buffalo in the sky. This star map had Orion's belt, which was the backbone of this buffalo. The nose of the buffalo was the Pleiades. The tail of this buffalo was the star Sirius. So it was a huge constellation. And she said that there are various stars, these stars related to certain specific points in the Black Hills, which is kind of the center of the Lakota Sioux world. It's Harney Peak is kind of the great mountain at the center of the world as far as the Lakota goes. So this concept of as above, so below, she kind of planted this seed of how the earth can mirror the sky in certain ancient cultures.
And of course, we also see this in other areas as well. Most notably, and probably most well known, in Egypt, with the placement of the Great Pyramids at Giza.
Oh, sure, yeah. In fact, that's really how I got into this whole Orion correlation theory as applied to the Southwest. I'd moved down to Arizona, and I was going to a Kachina dance on the Hopi reservation. Okay, and just for some background, some of your listeners might be familiar with Kachinas and Kachina dolls that the Hopi and the Zuni and the other Pueblo people carve. And these are basically intermediary spirits. They are kind of go-betweens between the plane of the earth and the plane of the gods. They're kind of analogous to angels, what we'd call good spirits. And these Kachinas have different sorts of masks. And the Kachinas dance in the plaza every spring and early summer. The masks are really bizarre looking. They come in all different shapes. They're not one uniform style. They might be circular, or dome-shaped, or cylindrical. They might have feathers and horns on them. It really depends on the Kachina. Some even look like helmets, like kind of space helmets with little slits for eyes. But anyway, I was going up to one of these Kachina dances on the Hopi reservation, and I had just read Robert Bauval's book, The Orion Mystery, which, of course, he has brought us the theory that the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau mirror the belt stars of Orion, and they're very an exact pattern on the Earth of these three pyramids. It mirrors these three stars up in the heavens. And I was looking up, driving, along Interstate 40 in these vast, empty spaces. Well, I don't think they're empty, but they're quite beautiful, filled with beauty. But a lot of people think the Arizona desert is empty. But anyway, I was driving up towards the three Hopi mesas. The Hopi have settled on these three primary mesas in northern Arizona, and they're labeled first, second, and third mesa, and they're in a row from west to east, and they're about 7 miles apart. They're quite large mesas, and the Hopi have built villages both on the tops of the mesas and at the base of the mesas, and they started building these stone pueblos in about 1100 AD. And, I was wondering whether, these three, mesas in a row, I was wondering whether we might have an Orion correlation right here in Arizona. So I went up to the mesas and watched the Kachinas dance. And then I came back home and I got out a sky chart and I got out a map of Arizona. And, I spread the two side by side and I found that there was either a Hopi village site that was inhabited to this day or an ancient Hopi ruin that corresponded to every major star in the constellation. And this pattern similarity was just uncanny. It was just amazing. It was stunning to me how these two matched up. The sky and the earth matched up, similar to what Charlotte Black Elk was telling me a decade or so before. That the earth can match the sky. The ritual places on the earth, sacred sites, can match certain stars in the heavens. So I became intrigued with that and started researching it and got into each one of the sites and it took me about 15 years to write the first book, The Orion Zone.
Well, that sounds quite fascinating, and in fact, I posted a link to your article from Ancient American, which is available on your website, entitled "As Above, So Below" in Ancient Arizona, which actually has a very nice map and picture there for people to look at if they're interested. I posted that in the chat room for people to take a look at, and you can see how the correlation of the various cities there and the three mesas that Gary was talking about actually do correlate quite nicely with the Orion system. So if you want to take a look at that, the link is in the chat room there.
Also, Ted,
yes.
Ted, there's a map page on my website. You go to the first page of the website, and there's a link to maps, and there's a whole bunch of maps that show this very clearly.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, very good. That's at theorionzone.com/maps.htm, and when you go there, you can see the side-by-side comparisons between the as above stars and as below the actual buildings of the Hopi and down there in Southwestern. Yes, this is quite good, yes. So this is a great resource for anybody who wants to actually look into this stuff. Of course, there's a lot of stuff on Gary's website. You could spend a lot of time there, as I have, looking over some of the articles that he has done. And also, of course, order his books there as well. This is a very interesting topic to me because I'm convinced, as I'm sure a lot of my researchers are, that the ancient Native American peoples actually had a very sophisticated knowledge of the stars in much the same way as we can see with other ancient peoples around the world. It seems something that is quite ubiquitous. And, of course, that begs lots of questions as to why these people were seemingly obsessed with the sky and the stars and why there is this preservation of knowledge in this particular way. Gary, have you delved into that particular aspect of this? As to the reasoning behind the mirroring of the sky here and what it actually signifies or may signify?
Yeah, in terms of the Hopi culture specifically and some of the other Pueblo cultures, the constellation Orion is the most important. And the reason why it's the most important is because of a ceremony that they perform on the first day of winter, the winter solstice ceremony. And of course, Orion is a great winter constellation. You can see it rising in the early evening now, about this time of year, and you can see it throughout the winter. And the Hopi used this particular constellation to kind of synchronize the start of the winter solstice ceremony. This ceremony was performed not out in the open, but in an underground prayer chamber called a kiva. A lot of the sacred ceremonies are performed down in this subterranean or semi-subterranean structure. For the Hopi, they're usually rectangular. For other Pueblo groups, they might be round. But the same elements are all there in the kiva. And there's an overhead hatchway through which you can see the sky. And there's a ladder going up, and that's how you descend into this chamber from a ladder. And when Orion appears in this overhead hatchway, that is the signal for this winter solstice ceremony to begin. Now, the Hopi, they were very aware of not only the stars, but the way the sun rose on the horizon. They'd have a specific person in the tribe called a Tawa Mungwi, a sun watcher, that would look where the sun rose each day of the year. Get up very early and watch the eastern horizon to see where on the horizon the sun would rise. Now, for instance, on the vernal and autumnal equinox, it rises due east. In the summertime, it tends to rise a little bit farther north on the eastern horizon. And in the winter, it tends to rise a little bit farther south on the horizon, kind of towards the southwest, or at the southeast, I'm sorry. And, so they were very aware of this, and they geared their agricultural calendar to where the sun rose on the horizon. So they needed to know, when the winter solstice was, so they could basically start the year. The start of the year for the Hopi is the winter solstice. So it's the most important ceremony. And it's the time where the Kachinas arrive on the three Hopi mesas. They've been living in the underworld. They've been living on the top of Humphreys Peak, which is the highest point in Arizona. And then they come from the peaks to the three Hopi mesas, and they spend the spring and the summer with the Hopi, and they encourage agricultural growth and rainfall during this time. So it's this whole cycle of the stars and the solar cycle and the sidereal cycle interwoven in their culture, and it's a very complex sort of thing that they've been developing for over 1,000 years and probably many thousands of years.
And you, just to go back a little bit further to the people that came before the Hopis, as is noted in the bio on your page, that the so-called Anasazi, being a precursor to the Hopi people, is it through this people that the Hopis, can we trace back their mythology and their interest in the stars back through the so-called Anasazi peoples as well?
Well, the Hopi themselves really don't see a distinction between the tribe as it is now and the Anasazi, or they don't use the word Anasazi because Anasazi is really a Navajo word, or Dene word, which means ancient enemy. So the Hopi don't use this term to refer to themselves. They call themselves the Hizatsinom, or simply the old ones, or the old people, or the ancient people. That's their ancestors, and their ancestors are living in the underworld right now, which is at the bottom of Grand Canyon, and they consult the ancestors for their ceremonies and such. So, there's really no division between, ancient times or the ancient people and the contemporary Hopis living on the mesas right now. They see it as one kind of continuous cycle between the spirit world and the material world.
Mm. It sounds very similar to Australian Aborigines.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah, yeah. A lot of the native cultures do have this kind of shamanic relationship with their ancestors. It's maybe has been called an ancestor cult by some anthropologists, but it's a close relationship with the ancestors, with the ones that lived and built these ancient pueblos. And the Hopi still go to some of these sites today and perform sacred rituals at these sites to reconsecrate these sites and to keep the energy alive at these sites.
Mm. And you had mentioned the Kivas, and of course your latest book is The Kivas of Heaven. This obviously has a significance to the Hopi in their creation mythology, in that the Hopis believe that they actually came from underground. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's right. The Hopi and a lot of different Pueblo people, the Zuni and the Acoma and the Laguna people and all the Pueblos along the Rio Grande, they believe that they came from a place called the Sipapu. It's a place, for the Hopi, it's a place in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's a very specific place. You can find it on Google Earth, in fact. It's a natural formation that is called the Travertine Dome. It's a kind of a large dome-shaped limestone formation, and it's got a hole right in the middle of it. So if you look down on it, it looked like a circle with a hole in the middle of it. Of course, Dan Brown in his book The Lost Symbol calls this a circumpunct, and it's a very ancient kind of symbol. It's a sacred symbol that means divine consciousness and the spark of life, and it can represent the sun. But the Hopi believe that they emerged from a previous world. They call it third world, because we're living in the fourth world right now, or at the end of the fourth world, really. And they believe they came up through a giant reed, up through this hole in the earth, which is the Sipapu, and they came up into the Grand Canyon, and they climbed out of the Grand Canyon, and then they populated the Colorado Plateau. So they really came from beneath the earth, in the underworld where the ancestors still live. The ancestors go back to that source of the Hopi existence. So, it's this whole cycle between life and death, and going to the material plane and then going back down. You see, the thrust of sacredness is to go downward, to go into the Kiva, which represents the third world, and then go down into the earth, and that's the source of growth for the corn, and also human growth as well, because it produced the Hopi people.
Well, actually, when you look at it, I mean, everything comes from the earth. I mean, they could certainly look at that from a very broad perspective and see that everything that is on the earth came from the earth, came out of the earth in one form or another, whether it be via elements or growing things or anything of this nature. So one could definitely see a correlation there. One other thing that kind of reminded me there, when you were describing the Sipapu, it sounded also like it might be equivalent to like an Umphalos as well, like a. It is a it's kind of a center of the Hopi world.
Mm-hmm. It is that egg of life that's down there. So yeah, it's definitely what has been called an axis mundi, or center of the world for the Hopi, and they came up out of that place, and they started migrating. They didn't settle right away on the Hopi mesas. They started migrating around the Southwest, and some say they went as far east as Serpent Mound in Ohio, and the snake clan of the Hopi claimed to have built Serpent Mound. And then some of the Hopi migrated down into the Maya territory. So you have, a link between the Maya and the Hopi. You have an even archaeological link because in the Southwest here, archaeologists have unearthed a lot of scarlet macaws, which are jungle birds that only live in the tropical areas of Mesoamerica. And there used to be a trade between, the Maya territory and the American Southwest. And they imported these birds, these beautiful, colorful birds that are a brilliant red color with blue tail feathers and kind of chrome yellow on some of the feathers. So, they were highly prized for rituals and so forth. And they imported a lot of these feathers and whole birds, live birds, up into the American Southwest, and they raised these birds at various sites around Arizona, New Mexico, and southwestern Colorado. It was quite an interaction between, the Maya and the Hopi.
And you also mentioned that they may have had some connection with what archaeologists refer to as the mound builders, which in most of the study that I've done on the so-called mound culture, it seems as though archaeologists either don't know or are unwilling to say exactly where these mounds come from and who the people were that created them. So, is it your belief that the Hopi may be the origin of the actual supposed mound people themselves?
Well, I think they definitely were in that area and interacted with like the Hopewell culture in the along the Ohio Valley and so forth in that region, and also Cahokia in the Midwest there. East of St. Louis. So, I think that they had connections, and there are mounds right here in Arizona, in fact, and they stretch down into Mexico. If you want to see a truncated pyramid or a platform mound, you can go. There's one called Pueblos Grandes, and it's located almost next to the Phoenix airport. And a people related to the Hopi called the Hohokam built this very early on the Phoenix Basin. And these people, built similar types of mounds and platforms to the people back east in the southeast and in the Ohio region there. So I think the groups very early had a greater, they went greater distances than a lot of academics will admit to. Academia tends to narrow things and look at a specific culture, and they don't want to widen things out as much. They don't want to admit to, the Hopi going down into the Maya territory or back east. But this is true. The Hopi have traditions of going up into Canada. In fact, so they went all over on this centuries-long migration route. There have been petroglyphs found that are supposedly the Hopi snake clan made in Alberta, Canada. So the Hopi really got around. They went to the West Coast and picked up a lot of shells and brought them back. So, the Hopi were making this grand circle around the American Southwest before they even got to the three Hopi mesas where they now live. And they settled there around a little before 1100 A.D. They began to build these stone apartment buildings or pueblos on these mesas. But before that time, they were just kind of traveling around, building a village, and then they'd abandon the village, and they'd break all their pottery and move on to another place. And, a lot of people think that a certain star they were following or a certain god named Masau. Was it a very important god? You can talk about that Masau, the god of the earth, was kind of leading them across the desert to seek to ultimately seek the homeland where they now live.
So, excuse me. So what you're saying is that the Hopi actually they may have actually been using the sky and what they were viewing in the sky as a beacon, or as in a way of telling them where to go and where to settle, and how to set up their original lands there on the first, second, and third mesa.
They certainly knew the sky intimately, and there's a lot of ways you can interpret. There are legends of the Hopi following a star, which is kind of hard to believe. If you're of the ancient aliens persuasion, you might think they were following a UFO, across the land. And we can get into that because the Hopi have legends of what they call flying shields that led them across, that they came down and interacted with. But the Hopi did, go across the land following a certain star, and when the star stopped, they stopped. So, it really depends on your point of view whether you want to take the ancient astronaut theory literally, or whether these were spirit beings coming down and informing the Hopi. It's really hard to say at this point.
It is, and of course, when we look at ancient history in this manner, and the way that myths are handed down to the current day, and the amount of manipulation that a lot of this material has been given over the years, it's very difficult to discern what is true and what is not. But certainly, I do not have a predisposition to say that everything is mythologically oriented or has a mythological connotation. In other words, that these were merely spiritual things, or that they had that they were metaphors for something else. That in fact, the ancient astronaut or ancient alien theory may in fact be correct. I don't discount that. But I do see exactly what you're saying about academia and their sort of wanting to be extremely conservative about what they say about ancient America. And of course, that leaves us all quite in the dark about what was really going on here in the Americas in ancient times, because even the idea of the Clovis culture being the first one here in the Americas has been completely shattered by discoveries, but yet mainstream archaeology still wants to kind of still lean on that as being the way things are, even though it's been pretty much destroyed. So
it takes time. It really takes time for academia to, and the tenure is involved. Keeping your job and saying the right line is important. If you're an archaeologist, you can't get too radical. There's one archaeologist named Stephen Lexon, and he has this idea that there was a meridian going from northern New Mexico down into the state of Chihuahua in Mexico, and there were different villages along these lines. He's an established archaeologist, but he still gets flack from his peers that say this is just a wild theory that all these cultures along this line from northern New Mexico down into northern Mexico would be related. That's just almost unheard of, in the staid world of the university system. So it's a constant battle to really get the truth out there and have these people kind of loosen up a little bit and accept these, at least look at these alternative theories. It's really hard.
Yes, it is, and of course, there's much more here with the material that you have, which is really fascinating. One thing I wanted you to comment on just briefly here before we take our first break, which will be in about 9 minutes or so, about 7:45. I wanted you to comment on the idea of the as above, so below, and the connection that there may be with Masons and Masonry, between the Masonic ideology that and the beliefs of Masons and the ancient Native American peoples. You seem to draw a connection because you've pointed out where there are actually some Masonic buildings in relation to Native American sites, and some of the things that we've talked about obviously have shown correlations there.
Well, sure. There's in the course of my research, I found a lot of Masonic connections, especially connected with the city of Phoenix. The city of Phoenix was founded by a guy named Darrell Duppa, and he named the city after this mythological bird that rises from its ashes every cycle. And this bird is kind of a Masonic symbol almost. He was a Freemason. This guy. It was the 1860s when he founded the city of Phoenix, and in fact, he was sitting on the platform mound that I mentioned before, Pueblo Grandes, near the Phoenix airport, and he was sitting there with some friends, and he gave the name of Phoenix to the town that they were founding, and this guy was an interesting guy. He was classically trained in Greek and Latin, and he knew Italian and French, and he could quote Shakespeare by the hour. So he was an erudite kind of pioneer. But he and other Masons started the city of Phoenix, and the Phoenix is located on the 33rd parallel. And if you know a little bit about Freemasonry, you know that the 33rd degree is the highest degree that a Mason can attain. And I've noticed in my research that along the 33rd parallel north, Phoenix is located on there, and a lot of interesting sites, both past and present, are located on the 33rd parallel. For instance, the largest Masonic temple, or the most important one, is located in Charleston, South Carolina. And this is on the 33rd parallel. It's called the Mother Lodge of Freemasonry, at least for the Scottish Freemasons that Albert Pike and company were connected with. And there are a lot of different sites. Babylon is located on the 33rd parallel. The Chinese pyramids over there in the Sichuan, China, are located on the 33rd parallel. So there's a lot of sites all over the globe that run right through the 33rd parallel. And so, I think this fellow Duppa was conscious of this, and that's why he picked out the location for the city of Phoenix. And it's the Phoenix has had a lot of different connections with Masons through the years. Barry Goldwater was a Mason, the senator from Arizona. The first governor of Arizona was a Mason. And in one of my books, you can find his burial site. He's buried in an Egyptian-style pyramid. His name is George Hunt. And he's buried in this pyramid mausoleum kind of thing. It's very bizarre to see. It's right by the Phoenix Zoo, in case you want to go and look at it. There's, the so-called father of Arizona, Charles Poston, who named the Arizona Territory back in the 1860s. He's also buried in a pyramid a little farther south in Florence, Arizona. So there's a lot of these Masonic connections, and even the street map of Phoenix has a pyramid in it, and the eye of the pyramid is where the Masonic Lodge is located. So it's there's a lot of these seeming coincidences that link Freemasonry and Phoenix in particular, and the Southwest in general. I say Phoenix was the mythological bird, but the Southwest in general is called Aztlan, and which means literally the place of the heron. And the heron is kind of a naturalistic form of the phoenix. So the birds are related. So there's a lot of different connections.
Well, let me ask you this: considering this fact, the fact of the connections that one can see there, do you believe that that it's possible that the Native American peoples and the beliefs of Masonry may both derive from some common origin in the ancient past?
Well, I think the Hopi might have had some connection with traveling groups from the old world, maybe Phoenicians that came over here and came through the Southwest. There's some evidence linguistically, for instance, in the Hopi language. The word for star is Sohu, and in Egypt, the words for the stars of Orion is Sahu. So it's a very, very similar kind of linguistic wordplay going on. There's, we could talk about the Lost City in the Grand Canyon. Some of your listeners might know about. Of course, the Grand Canyon is where the Hopi say they originated from.
Yeah.
But this Lost City came about, came to light in 1909. There was a guy named Kincaid. He was working for the Smithsonian, and he was going down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon, and he found this on the side of the cliff in the Grand Canyon, really around Marble Canyon there. He found this incredible complex of passageways, and he climbed up with great difficulty, climbed up the side of the cliff and entered the side of the cliff, and there was a horizontal tunnel that went hundreds of feet into the earth, and he came out and into this main hall, and he found all kinds of artifacts that really they're out of place artifacts. Really, they shouldn't have been there. He found kind of tools made of copper and gold, and he found a Buddha-like statue in a lotus posture, and he found Egyptian-style mummies that were leaned up against the wall. I mean, this stuff is just bizarre stuff that he was supposedly found. They had a big dining hall with cooking utensils, so a lot of people lived in this. And this was like 2,000 feet above the river, and like 1,000 feet down from the rim of the cliff. So it's very hard to get to. He got there with great difficulty. But,
Very interesting. Of course, I'm familiar with the story that you're talking about there, and there are some other very interesting things about the Grand Canyon itself that we can talk about as well when we come back from our break. So right now, everybody, you're listening to the Stench of Truth radio show here on Inception Radio Network, and my guest today is Gary A. David, and he is an author of 3 books, at least 3 nonfiction books and 2 books of poetry, and he has done extensive research on the Native Americans of the Southwest and correlation of the cities of the Hopi and the stars of Orion, and we're talking about a lot of that and some other interesting connections of the Native Americans and trade routes and things of this nature. So stay with us through the break, and when we come back, we'll be talking some more about the Grand Canyon and some other things related to
paranormal powerhouse of talk radio. Live around the world, it's the Inception Radio Network. Chase Kletzky and Michael Rambacher. Project White Paper. The Stench of Truth. Epic Voyages. Future Theater. Pang Radio. The Jerry Pippin Show. The UK's Haunted Cornwall. The Eyewitness Radio Show. And the network's flagship broadcast, the Inception Radio Show, with host Jamie Havocan. So lock in the paranormal talk show leader, the Inception Radio Network.
Hello all, Jamie Havocan here. Let me tell you something if you have not heard. There is a magazine out there. Many say it is the best ufology magazine in the world, and I highly agree. UFO Mag, if you're not a subscriber, please go there. UFOmag.com is the best ufology magazine in the world. Keep up to date on UFO news, subjects, and everything in ufology with some of the best writers around. For Inception Radio listeners only. Usually it's $19.95 for 5 issues. If you mention Inception Radio, you get 6 issues for $19.95. Go there now. UFOmag.com. Tell them Jamie sent you. I'll see you there. Hey guys, Jamie Havocan here, reminding you to tune into Future Theater Radio, Saturdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, as host Bill and Nancy Burns bring you the brightest and best guests from around the world to share their vast knowledge with us listeners. That's Future Theater Radio, Saturdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, right here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. Just go there and hit the Listen Live and Chat tab, and you're in business. I'll see you there. Hey guys, Jamie Havocan here for RC International Radio. That's right. You heard it. RC International Radio. If you're wondering what RC stands for on a ufology and paranormal network, it is radio controlled. And it is hosted by myself, Jamie Havocan, and my sidekick, Donnie Eatman, every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific. Tune in, call in, ask questions. Do what me and Donnie been up to, upgrading our cars, and listen to stories from other people who call in and share their experiences or ask for advice. That's RC International Radio, Saturdays, 11 a.m. Eastern. I'll see you there.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs with Arkansas MUFON at Eyewitness Radio, and you're listening to the one and only paranormal mothership, the Inception Radio Network.
Does it serve to be so heeding to a malevolent God? She'll be here tomorrow and yesterday. She's been in everyone, in everywhere.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stench of Truth radio show here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com every Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Ted Torbich, and my guest today is Gary A. David, a noted author and researcher of the Native American peoples of the Southwest, and he has done some deep research into the trade routes that the Hopi people may have been involved with into South America and maybe even beyond. Right before we went to break, we were talking about the Grand Canyon and the discovery in the early 1900s of a large deposit of out-of-place artifacts. And one thing that I did want to mention in relation to this is the fact that there are many structures within the Grand Canyon itself which have Egyptian names, and I wondered if you could comment on that, Gary.
Well, the normal explanation is that all this this majesty of the Grand Canyon resembles the ancient culture and the majesty that you find in Egypt, and that could be true, but in the course of my research, and in particular, the Orion template as it's projected on the Arizona desert has a certain orientation, which I find very interesting. If you can look at the maps page on my website, or the article that you mentioned, Ted, before. You can see the left arm of Orion. Orion is reaching over towards the Grand Canyon. That left arm reaches to the northwest from a site called Wupatki. It's a ruined site north of Flagstaff, about 15 miles, and Wupatki was settled in the early 1100s. And this particular site, if you draw a line from Wupatki into the Grand Canyon, where this left arm of Orion and the shield of Orion, or perhaps a bow of Orion, you'll come right to a place called Osiris Temple, right in the middle of the Grand Canyon. And the particular star in the middle of the shield is called Pi 3 Orionis. And I started researching this star because it's so, Orion points to the Grand Canyon and Osiris. Of course, Osiris was the Egyptian god of the underworld in Egypt, the god of death, the god of resurrection, a very important god. And I started researching this particular star, Pi 3, and a lot of the stars of Orion are quite a distance from us. For instance, the belt stars are about 1,500 light years away. But this one particular star, Pi 3 Orionis, is only 26 light years away. It's also listed in the SETI star catalog. It's the kind of star that the people who look for ET life and exoplanets, they look at this sort of star because it's sort of similar, about the same size and temperature as our star, the Sun, and it could harbor planets and ET life, and it's in the top 10 target stars that NASA has. It's among the 10 that they're currently looking at. This rests right in the Grand Canyon at the place Osiris Temple. And of course, mythologically, the Grand Canyon is very important, as I mentioned before. That's source of the Hopi people. They came up through the giant reed, up through the Sipapuni, and in the Grand Canyon, and they came up and climbed out of the canyon and started migrating around the southwest. So
go ahead.
Yeah, so this correlation between the orientation of the Orion pattern on the desert, which points right to the Grand Canyon, and the place that the Hopi came from, it tends to make sense why this particular pattern was the way it was, oriented the way it was on the Arizona desert.
Now, do you see that there is a direct connection between the Hopi and the development of their civilization and the ancient Egyptians?
Well, I see a lot of correlations there. That particular correlation, the linguistic one I mentioned before. There's a specific artifact that the Hopi elders, spiritual elders all have, and it's called a manko. And this is kind of a forked stick. It's V-shaped at one end or Y-shaped at one end, and it has a ball of earth hanging down from it. And if you look at what has been recovered from the Great Pyramid, there's a couple artifacts. One is called the Peshenkef, found in the north shaft of the Queen's Chamber. And this Peshenkef, morphologically, or the form of it, really looks like this Hopi manko that they may have used for a sighting instrument, much like the Egyptian bay and meerkat. The Peshenkef it kind of has a plumb line hanging from it. They're very similar in shape, and it's possible that the Egyptians, perhaps with assistance of Phoenician sailors, which were great mariners and they sailed all over the globe in ancient times, perhaps they came over to the New World and influenced the cultures in the Americas.
It's certainly within the realm of possibility.
Right now, Ted, I'm trying to nail this down a little harder and find some genetic evidence. And my most recent research has been involved with genetics and finding there are correlations genetically between the tribes of the Southwest and the people of North Africa. So, there are different correlations there.
Well, it's certainly by the fact that we have had various archaeological discoveries over the years that make it outside of the control of the archaeological establishment, which generally frowns upon anything discovered that would cast into doubt the current paradigm as far as where the so-called scientific community says things come from and how things came about. But we do have some very solid evidence indicating that we've had visits to the Americas by Phoenicians, by the Romans, by other cultures around the world in ancient times. It's only a question of how extensive that actual travel and interaction was, to me anyway, and to anybody who would look at the evidence with an open mind. The only question one has to ask is to what extent the interaction and the influence actually was. Not that it was impossible to get here or that no one ever did come, because certainly we do see evidence that is the case. There was travel between the old world and the new world before officially it was discovered, as it were.
Sure. Yeah, I agree that. And, it's kind of a political thing that a lot of this information has been suppressed. Because in the beginning of the 20th century, a lot of the archaeologists started to switch over to what they call isolationism. That means that, small bands of Native Americans were kind of toughing it out alone in these, in these isolated tribes, and they didn't travel very far. They didn't, go much farther than the next hillside. That's what standard archaeologists would have you believe. But this discovery in Grand Canyon, whether it's true or not, it's hard to say, because the Smithsonian at that time was becoming isolationist rather than diffusionist, and they more or less, if it is true, it's my belief that the artifacts that they found in the Grand Canyon, which are out of place, they took them out of there, and they might have dynamited the tunnels, and because it was just outside the paradigm of what was developing in archaeology at that time. So I think it might, those artifacts might be like the old Indiana Jones movie, where in some warehouse in Washington somewhere, in the basement, all these out of place artifacts from the Grand Canyon are sitting in a big crate or something,
Yes, well, I mean, that may be more fact than fiction. I had a guest on my show a while back who actually made the contention that the Smithsonian actually took a lot of these out-of-place artifacts that were inconvenient for the establishment academic point of view, put them all on a barge, took them out into the ocean, and sunk it.
I've heard that story too. That's possible.
Have you heard that one as well?
Yeah.
So yeah,
they wanted to suppress this information because they were developing this theory of isolationism, and they were trying to suppress this older theory that the ancient people got around a lot more. But now we're finding that's not the case. With this Monteverde site in Chile that was 16,000 years old. That blows Clovis, the whole Clovis paradigm, out of the water. And there is a lot of evidence that ancient peoples, mostly traveled on boats across the ocean, because that's the easy way to do it. It's not over the Bering Straits. That's the really hard way. And I'm not saying that people didn't come over the Bering Straits when there was kind of a crack in the ice when the glaciers were starting to melt. I'm not saying that's not possible, but really the easy way to do it is to get on a boat, get on a raft, and sail across the ocean. And indeed, the Hopi have legends, alternative legends from the one I said before, that they came out of the Grand Canyon from the Third World to the Fourth. They also say that they came across the ocean on reed rafts across the Pacific Ocean, and that's entirely possible. So they might have come from the old world in that way, and they were escaping a great flood. The Third World ended in a great flood, apparently, and so they were escaping this great flood on these rafts, and they came to the New World. So they might be talking about Lemuria or Mu in the Pacific that went down at one time and very long ago.
And there does seem to be some archaeological support for an ancient civilization being somewhere there in the Pacific, and the idea of Lemuria and Mu may have some basis in fact, rather than being entirely mythological, much the same way as Atlantis seems to have some basis in reality as well. One thing that's interesting to me that maybe you could flesh out a little bit for us is, you talked about how the Hopi had believed that we were in the fourth world, that the first three worlds had passed away and that we were in the fourth world. And what it seems to me, when you said that, it reminded me of a lot of the other cultures around the world which have this idea of ages that the Earth goes through, and the idea of well, it was outlined in Theosophy too, of course, by Helena Blavatsky, who more or less syncretistically put a lot of this information together into sort of one big amalgamation. But there does seem to be, like, all the way back to the ancient Indus Valley, this idea of cycles and of ages, of worlds that the Earth actually travels through. And when you said that the Hopi believed that we were in the fourth world, I wanted to ask you if we can trace a connection all the way back to these really, really ancient ideas that come out of the Indus Valley and the ancient Indian subcontinent.
Well, sure. Yeah, the yugas and all that came
Yes.
out of the Indus River Valley, and I think there was a world culture back then that they traveled around the world, and this idea of the ages came over, and you can see it in the Mayan culture. There are four worlds. We're coming well today. In fact, according to Carl Kalaman, is the end of the Mayan cycle, October 28th. Excuse me. Of course, most people see it as December 21st, 2012, that the cycle will end. So there is this idea of world ages among the Maya and also the Hopi. The Hopi talk about four different worlds. The first world, for instance, was destroyed by fire. It could be some kind of volcanism, or it could be an asteroid strike, or it could be a solar mass ejection sort of thing. That the idea of fire destroying the world. That's the first Hopi world was destroyed by fire. The second Hopi world was destroyed by ice. Perhaps a great ice age came across the world and kind of shut down all cultural activities. And the third world was destroyed, but as I said, by a great flood. So this idea of cyclic time is really apparent in the Hopi and the Maya both, though the Hopi are really not specific about particular dates like the Maya are. The Hopi are maybe considered the masters of space, and the Maya might be considered the masters of time, because they have these incredible cycles that go far, far into the past, and 3114 is the beginning of this particular cycle, BC that is, this particular cycle, and it's going to end on December 21st, 2012. And the Hopi really, when you ask the Hopi people, they just say, well, it's coming very soon. And there are particular signs of this that have been foretold in Hopi prophecy about the end of the fourth world. And we could get into that if you want to.
Oh, absolutely. But I wanted to let you expand upon that, of course. And I also wanted to ask you, do the Hopi have a belief about what the fifth world will be like?
Well, they say it will be a world of peace, because they projected a lot of, or they prophesied a lot of these things that are coming to pass right now. But they say the fifth world will be one of peace and kind of harmony with Mother Earth, and the Corn Mother, of course, is very strong in Hopi belief system, kind of like a system of Gaia that James Lovelock came up with a number of years ago. The Earth is a living creature, and we're just abusing this Earth terribly. And the Earth is reacting against this our presence here, and that the Hopi believe that a lot of these things, these earthquakes and these epidemics and tsunamis and so forth, this is all the result of the people not living in the way of the Great Spirit, of Masau, of the sun god Tawa. There's a lot of ways they put it, but we're just not living correctly and close to the earth like we should be. And I could talk about the Prophecy Rock as a visual explanation of the two paths that humanity is on. I was just at Prophecy Rock this past summer on the Hopi reservation, and I talked with a man named Martin Gashwesioma. Grandfather Martin is from the village of Hotevilla on the Third Mesa. He's from the Fire Clan, which has a Fire Clan tablet they keep. And he was talking about the two different paths on this Prophecy Rock. And if you Google Prophecy Rock, you can come up with images of this particular rock. It has two diagonal lines going from left to right, upward. And on the bottom line, there are basically three circles, and these are thought of as the three great shakings of the earth. Some believe that we've endured World War I and World War II, and we were coming close to being engaging in World War III. So these are these three circles, and you have on this lower line you have a figure, a human figure tending corn, and this is the Hopi way to live close to the earth, close to Mother Earth and the ways of the spirits. And then you have a line above, parallel line above this lower line, and you have a number of figures that are linked. Their hands are linked, and the line just kind of zags off into the air, and that's the line that a lot of society is on right now. It's not rooted in true values as the Hopi see it, and Mother Earth. It's living away from, estranged from Mother Earth. The Hopi call this Koyaniskatsi, the living in a chaotic world, in a basic urban, and we're connected to our urban technological devices, and we're kind of lost without them. But the Hopi are still up there, growing corn and growing in the old ways, and it's dry farming up there. To grow corn in the desert is not the easiest thing. I mean, you really have to pray a lot, and you have to invoke the Kachinas, which they do every year, in order to just survive.
Yes. Yeah, it's a hard life, obviously.
It's getting harder all the time because the youth are lured by the cities. They go down in the cities to get jobs, and they go away from their reservation, and they don't learn the ceremonies, and they don't learn the language, and they don't learn the ancient legends anymore, and they're becoming kind of a fractured society. And the Hopi say, well, yeah, this is what happens at the end of the fourth world. We're very close to the end of the fourth world.
And that's another correlation, of course, between the beliefs of other cultures and the Hopi as well, because there seems to be this idea that is recurrent with all of these belief systems around the world, with ancient beliefs, and that is the idea that we go through a series of degenerations from a better time in the past. We get a little more degenerate, and finally we get to the final age, which some have called iron, which obviously the Hopi call the fourth world. In where we are most degenerate, and then it cycles back to the beginning where we are back to a golden age when there's peace and love and harmony, and everybody lives in harmony with themselves and with Earth.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of the cultures, as you say, the Greeks had the gold, silver, bronze, and iron ages, and this parallels the yugas of India and the New World, the Maya, and the Hopi as well, and the Aztecs too. Except the Aztecs talk about we're living in the fifth world and soon to go into the sixth world. But this idea of cyclical time rather than linear time, which that's linear time is the time that a lot of us in modern society are living in clockwork time. And not the rhythms of the earth and the seasons, and paying attention to the stars and how they rise in the sky at certain times of the year. That's very important to the Hopi people and Native American people in general.
Indeed, it was, and of course, other people around the world as well, as we've noted earlier. I want to also obviously get into the idea of this world-spanning civilization in ancient times, and also wanted to ask you about the ant people, and maybe we could get into that in a moment. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you, a good friend of mine, Andy Colvin, is a writer. He does research on the Mothman, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that phenomenon from most famously from West Virginia in 1967. Yeah, he has a theory that the Mothman as seen during those times was a manifestation of like a Thunderbird-like character, and or the Garuda of the ancient Indians and the Buddha. The Buddhist religion. And what I wanted to ask you is there a correlative character within the Hopi mythology, like a Thunderbird-like character or a flying man type being that they have within their mythology?
Well, Ted, in my most recent book, Kivas of Heaven, I have a chapter about the ancient Mothman in the American Southwest. There's a place called Pottery Mound, and of course it has a lot of pottery they found there, but one of the striking things about this particular site in central New Mexico is the number of murals that they found on the walls of these rectangular kivas. Rectangular kivas are great for painting these different murals, and they found these amazing, colorful, multicolored murals at this site. And by the way, this site is located on a platform mound or a truncated pyramid. So the village was actually on a flat pyramid. But at this site, they found one of the images was an image of a person, a humanoid that had these moth wings and had kind of a proboscis like a moth would have. And so this is a part of the shamanic tradition of the Pueblo people in the Southwest. This Mothman. Coincidentally, they also found a lot of use of the plant datura. This is the moonflower. It grows all over the Southwest here. and it's a hallucinogen. It's a very strong hallucinogen that was used in the American Southwest. And they found a lot of seeds there, and they found ritual artifacts that look like the seed pod of the Datura plant. And it's my belief that this kind of, the shamans of the group would ingest these seeds of the Datura plant, and they would turn into these therianthropes, these hybrid animal or insect-human creatures, and they would go into the spirit world, and they would seek what they needed to seek about various illnesses and so forth. But there are these images, very strong images of Mothman on these pyramids or in these kivas that are, that were built around 1300 AD, before the Spanish ever came into this region.
So, if I'm reading you correctly, would it be your belief that, like, the depictions of Mothman that you're seeing there in the ancient the petroglyphs, would this be like a depiction of like a shaman actually going into the spirit world in order to gain knowledge for the betterment of his tribe, or something along those lines?
Yeah, that's my interpretation of it, Ted.
Okay.
A lot of people think it might be a literal moth creature, some kind of cryptozoological creature that inhabited. And there are stories of kind of Bigfoot-like creatures here too. So I'm not discounting that, but
right.
I do see a strong shaman tradition in the Southwest, and perhaps dealing with these hallucinogens. This is the way they entered the spirit world and became these particular creatures.
Very interesting. Thank you for expounding on that. I appreciate it. It's a very interesting side note there for anybody that's interested. Definitely check out the pottery. What was it called? The Pottery Mound.
A pottery mound, yeah.
There's
a chapter in my book, The Kivas of Heaven.
Yeah, and that is Gary David's latest book. That's The Kivas of Heaven, the third in the series to talk about this subject. Now, I wanted to ask you about the ant people. Can you tell us a little bit about the ant people?
Sure, yeah. The ant people are legendary creatures in Hopi myth. I mentioned before about the destruction of the first world by fire and the second world by ice. And apparently, the Hopi were saved from these two different cataclysms by the ant people, by people that the humanoid creatures that apparently look like ants. And I've seen petroglyphs of some of these ant-like creatures. They have antenna, rock art pictures of these creatures, and they certainly look ant-like. They have antenna and these kind of real spindly bodies, and they have large eyes and kind of bulbous head. They really look like insects, a cross between insects and humans. And you see these petroglyphs around the Southwest. I have pictures in my book about that show these ant-like creatures. And the ant people apparently took the Hopi down into caverns during these two different cataclysms, the destruction of the first world and the destruction of the second world. And they showed them the Hopi how to sprout beans in these caverns. And even today there's what's called the bean dance. It's held in February to commemorate this time when the ant people helped the Hopi survive, basically, and survive into the next world. So, it's very interesting. This legendary creature helping the Hopi people survive. And it's kind of interesting, a little linguistic thing I discovered. The Hopi word for ant is Anu, and the Hopi word for friend is Naki. The Anunnaki.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting.
Maybe this is just a coincidence, but, it's hard to, to see these particular petroglyphs and to know about the legends of the ant people. The Anunnaki, the same that you find on the cylinder seals in Sumeria, in ancient Sumer. It's really a kind of an interesting little linguistic twist there.
Yes, it is. I'm looking at on your website at the Anthills section where you talk about Masau and his connection with Orion. Obviously, he could also be seen, I guess, as a New World version of Osiris, I imagine.
Exactly.
Being that he's like a god of the dead, but being that it's connected with Orion, there's obviously a possibility that there might be, some connection. Like as you postulate, it could be possible that we're actually talking about actual living beings that may, look that way and have a physical body that the ancient Indian peoples had been in contact with during these times of crisis, and of course your exposition there on Anu and Naki is also very, very interesting connection. And as you say, it may be coincidence, but sometimes coincidence is not enough to explain some of the correlations that we see, for sure.
Well, when you find one coincidence on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, you begin to think, well, this is more than just sheer coincidence. It might be synchronistic, or, it might be a real pattern that's going on here. And, you mentioned Masau. Masau is a really interesting character in Hopi legend. A lot of Hopis don't like to talk about Masau at all. And depending on what clan they're in. Now, Grandfather Martin, whom I mentioned before, he's from the Fire Clan, and he really doesn't mind talking about Masau. But Masau is a really spooky-looking character. He has very large eyes. He has a large, round mouth. He has a bulbous head that's it's shaped like a summer squash. It's all bumpy and so forth. And he has long, spindly arms and long feet. And he's the only nocturnal god in the Hopi pantheon. So he's thought of as the god of death, the god of the underworld, the god of fire, and also the god of the earth plane. Now, Masau was the first creature that the Hopi encountered when they climbed up out of the Grand Canyon and began to populate the Colorado Plateau. They came across Masau, and Masau basically taught the Hopi how to plant corn. So he, in a sense, even though he's really terrifying to look at, he also has a benevolent side, and he tries to help the Hopi people out through trying times.
And isn't this also another example of correlation as well? Because in almost every culture around the world, we have this same sort of scenario where some mysterious figure of one kind or another gives essential knowledge to the peoples, whether it be in in the ancient old world or in the ancient new world. The Hopi come out from the Grand Canyon, and this mysterious figure, Masau, teaches them how to plant corn. We have certain vestiges of civilization being given by mysterious visitors, like in South America. You had Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl. There's so many to name that there absolutely has to be, in my opinion, some germ of truth to this idea as it pertains to humanity in general, because it's related in so many different cultures. Perhaps we can talk about that a little bit more after we take our final break here. You're listening to the Stench of Truth radio show here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com, live every Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. My guest today is Gary A. David. His website is theorionzone.com. He is an author and researcher. He has written 3 nonfiction books about the Native Americans of the Southwest and their correlation with the Orion star system and their mythology, history, and much more. So stay with us through the break.
Hi, can you hear my voice? Imagine how many other people can hear it too. If you have advertising needs, then look no further. The Inception Radio Network currently has openings for on-air advertisements and radio show sponsorships. Given any thought to your target demographic? Inception has you covered there too. Advertising on a network gives you multiple opportunities to advertise on a wide variety of radio show broadcasts, and we have one to fit every advertising need. You know, in recent years, internet radio has exhibited a phenomenal listener growth. An Arbitron Edison survey shows that online radio boosts at least 33 million unique visitors each week and 54 million each month. And that number amazingly continues to grow. And these listeners are a part of many businesses' core demographics. And surveys have shown that internet radio listeners are far more likely than regular radio listeners to spend money on a whole range of activities. You know, internet listeners vote, they dine out and eat fast food, and they grab a cup of coffee. And here's the interesting one. They buy items online at a much higher rate than all other market segments combined. Internet radio also enables businesses to connect with consumers during work hours, where increasingly more lifestyle decisions are being made. Advertise with the best. The Inception Radio Network offers competitive advertising rates to fit just about anyone's advertising budget. Stop by today at www.inceptionradionetwork.com or call us toll-free at 1-888-919-2355. Get the word out. Get results with the Inception Radio Network.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you. And your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
Hi, Bob Tarmac for MJ'sHealthyWay.com. Are you into vitamins, nutrition, meal replacements, health shakes, keeping your body in good shape, your internal engine going? Boy, do I have a perfect place for you. MJ'sHealthyWay.com. They offer the best service and products, and they'll tell you anything you need to know about any product they have to offer. I get all my vitamins, meal replacements, shakes from MJ'sHealthyWay.com. That's spelled MJSHealthyWay.com. There's so much more at the website. Go check it out. MJ'sHealthyWay.com.
Hello, folks. Ray Hobbs here for the Inception Radio Network, reminding you to catch the Paranormal Guys radio show. If you like everything in the paranormal, you're going to love Pang Radio. Broadcasting live from the shores of Lake Superior in northern Wisconsin, MJ brings the brightest minds and the best investigators to the show for in-depth interviews, all the while taking questions from the interactive chat as well as toll-free call-in questions. It's live. It's every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific, and it's Pang Radio with MJ right here on the Inception Radio Network.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Just a drop of rain, would it lead you back to the day you lost the war? I don't mean to bring you down before tomorrow, but I need to leave you there before we've lost you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stench of Truth radio show here on InceptionRadioNetwork.com, live every Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Ted Torbich, and today my guest is Gary A. David, author and researcher on the Native Americans of the Southwest, their mythology, history, and their connection to the stars. He has written 3 books, The Orion Zone, Eye of the Phoenix, and The Kivas of Heaven, which are on this subject, and he has also written a couple of books of poetry as well. His website is theorionzone.com. And right before we went to break, we were talking about the one of the central deities of the Hopi, and that is Masau. And we had given a description of him, and you can actually see an image of him on the website there. And, of course, there is a superficial resemblance of Masau to what we today would regard as gray aliens, with the overlarge head and the big eyes. The only significant difference is that the grays are usually depicted with very small slit-like mouths, whereas Masau is shown with a very large mouth. Would you care to comment on that a little bit, Gary?
Sure. Masau, of course, is one of the most important gods of the Hopi, because he's taught them how to grow corn, as I mentioned before. Even his name is significant. The Masau, M-A-S, in Hopi, that literally means gray. The word mas means gray. So it's the resemblance between what we think of as a gray alien and this creature that's come down from Hopi legend. And not only that, you can see this creature carved in the rocks all over the Southwest. These large, very large eyes, very striking, large heads. You can see these depictions of this. And it runs all the way into Mexico. This motif goes all the way down into Mexico, and the figure of Tlaloc, the Aztec god, looks very much like Masau. This is a kind of a spooky-looking character, so it's a good time of year to be bringing up this god, getting around Halloween.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, because when you look at the depiction of him, yes, he is rather scary looking. But as you pointed out, he also seems to be benevolent to some extent as well. Maybe you could comment for us, since obviously we are around Halloween time for us. Do the Hopi actually have like evil spirits or what we might regard as sort of like a demonic sort of thing in their mythology, or an evil character or something to this effect?
Absolutely. They have some pretty frightening Kachinas that you can see in some of the dances. they're thought of as ogres or giants, and they have very large kind of bug eyes, and they have fangs, and they're really they wear a dark mask, and they carry usually carry some sort of knife with them around, and they're really intimidating creatures. I was at a Kachina dance a few years ago, and I was maybe standing too close or something, and one of these giants walked right by me, and carrying this big rusty butcher knife, these ogre Kachinas, and it's a terrifying thing, and there are legends of these things carrying children off, and the cannibalism is there, that whole thing that enters into it, into the discussion of the Pueblo people. There was a big flap in about 10 years ago about cannibalism at Chaco Canyon, a site in New Mexico, and there is some proof of that. Archaeologists have come forth with proof of cannibalism in the Southwest, and undeniable proof of this. And whether the Hopi did it or whether some interloping group that came from outside the Hopi sphere of influence, it's hard to say. But there are legends of these giants that walk across the Southwest, and they kind of terrorize the people. So there are evil spirits definitely in the Hopi belief system.
Do you think that the Kachina themselves and the fact that the Kachina dolls and the Kachinas are depicted, seeming as they have they all are depicted as wearing masks, are they not?
Sure. Yeah. That's
okay.
That's
yeah. So, are we seeing a more modern manifestation of perhaps mythological characters, anthropomorphized? Is that what your take on the Kachina is, or do you have a different opinion as to what exactly is being represented by the Kachina?
Well, the Hopi believed that at one time the Kachinas came in the flesh. They were material, physical beings that came to the Hopi, and they are basically benevolent creatures that help out the people, and that's why the Hopi still perform these dances. But because of the age, we're at the end of the Fourth World, the Hopi believe that the Kachinas only come in spirit now in these times. They used to come as physical beings, and now they just come as spiritual sort of beings. And when a man, and there's only men can do the Kachina dance, when a man puts on a mask, he essentially transforms into this spirit. It's like he's taken over. His whole being is transformed into this particular spirit, whatever the Kachina is. And there are hundreds of different types of Kachinas. And they all look different, but essentially when a Hopi puts on a mask and does the dance, and these are day-long dances in the hot Arizona sun, and they're pretty stressful on the body and the spirit, but the Kachinas kind of take over, and they they are thought to bring rainfall. They are thought to bring fertility to the land, and they're basically seen as a positive influence on the Hopi people.
Well, interestingly, as you were talking there about the dancing and the Kachina dance and things of that nature, you talked earlier a little bit about some genetic connection between Northern Africa and the Native American peoples of the Southwest. What struck me about your description there was a similarity to some of the beliefs of Vodun. or what is more commonly referred to as voodoo, where the spirits actually ride the people, come down and sort of possess the person who is going through the ritual, and that could possibly be another correlation between African mythology and the American Native Americans.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Except that the Kachinas are basically a positive thing, and
yes,
and the African spirits, a lot of times they're kind of they're adversarial, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
I went to South Africa a couple years ago, and I did some research on rock art down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never been to Africa before, and that just walking around the landscape there, it's so old, and there's so many spirits. You can feel the spiritual power of the land, and some of it's not always pleasant. It's kind of a dark energy that you can almost feel as you walk the African belt and walk around these sacred sites that people carved images into the stones there, into the rocks. You can really feel the spirits there. There is a similarity, of this spiritual takeover of humans, and it's well documented on the African continent. So yeah, there is a similarity there.
Yes. I don't know how much of a connection there was. It just, when you were describing it, that it certainly came to my mind that there seemed to be some similarity between the two anyway. So you had mentioned earlier, and I just mentioned it again, the idea of the genetic connection, and you were talking about some of the research that you were doing right now to try and come to some firmer conclusions about some of the origins of the Hopi and their myth and belief system. Can you tell us what it is that you're working on right now, and if we can expect to see another book sometime soon?
Well, hopefully, it's such an arduous process to try to go through a lot of these genetic papers that you can find. But I don't want to say too much about it because I'm just in the initial phases of this research. Mm-hmm. But I'm starting to see, definite genetic correlations with mitochondrial DNA and other genetic elements of the American Southwest, the Pima and Papago Indians, as well as the Hopis, and a connection to the African continent. So I don't want to get too far into it because I'm not a geneticist, and it's really difficult to do the research in that way, but I think it's the only way we're going to nail down this idea of diffusionism, the cultural diffusionism. You can compare artifacts and you can compare languages, but it's really not convincing unless you have a correlation in the DNA, and you can find that the origin of different tribal groups in the Americas were from the old world, particularly Africa.
Yes. Okay. Well, obviously, I wish you a lot of good luck in that research, and we'll look forward to anything that you have to come out in the future on that. I wonder if you could take a couple minutes just to give us a glimpse, sort of your view of the ancient world-spanning civilization that seems to have given rise to a lot of these cultures around the world, or at least influenced them in their beliefs and structure and society.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there was an ancient world culture, global culture, and for instance, the spread of the Orion correlations all over the globe. It's hard to find an explanation other than maybe it's an archetypal pattern in our own psyches. But I tend to think that there was some cultural exchange. I've found Orion correlations all over the globe. I've found them. There's one at Teotihuacan in Mexico. This patterning of Orion on the Earth, the belt stars in particular, just like on the Giza Plateau. I found one in Scotland. A friend of mine, Jeff Nisbet, discovered this pattern in Scotland that is an Orion correlation. There's the Thurnborough hinges there in the UK is also an Orion correlation. There are some Orion sites at the Great Zimbabwe in the country of Zimbabwe in southern Africa. So, this idea of Orion being projected on the Earth is a global phenomenon. I find it hard that cultures would just spontaneously, in isolation, come up with the same idea, the same correlation of Earth and sky.
And that does seem to lend a strong evidentiary point to the idea of a single culture being the origin of this. And one other thing that is also a very correlative of that is the idea of pyramids and mounds. And of course, ancient Egyptian mythology has it that the pyramids are actually representative of a primordial mound, which the gods came together to form, which was the first dry land of the earth, and that's where man developed. And of course, we see mounds in North America. We have pyramids in Central America. We have pyramids in Egypt. We have pyramids in China. We have mound-like structures in just about every culture. I mean, even Babylon had, the Tower of Babel in the biblical story. So this also is another very striking correlation that would be another sort of check mark on the side of having a one civilization behind some of this very similar phenomenon around the world. Would you say?
Sure. Yeah. In terms of the Hopi themselves, they don't actually build pyramids per se. Maybe some of the ancient people in the Southwest built pyramids, but the Hopi don't build pyramids anymore. What they did was to take these three mesas that they're now living on, and they kind of consecrated these mesas. And mesas are kind of a natural pyramid. It's got a flat top, and kind of like the Mayan pyramids in Mesoamerica. But the Hopi are very humble people, and they're not big with architectural projects. But the only large architectural development was at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, and this was a very grand city in its day, starting about 900 A.D. But Hopi didn't really get into building pyramids per se. Maybe a few mounds here and there. Like I say, in the Phoenix Basin, there are mounds, and they stretch into New Mexico and down into Mexico. But the Hopi are more or less kind of taking what's there in the natural world and building villages on there, and just emphasizing what's already in the natural world. But the effect is basically the same: to be lifted up and to be closer to the stars, closer to the sun, and to have an intimate relationship with the spirits of the sky. That's the basic idea. It comes across, and it's in all cultures really.
Do they? Yes, yes, I agree with you. And do the Hopi have a belief that is anyway similar to like what the Egyptians believed regarding the soul after the body dies? In that, the Egyptians believed that the pharaoh would go to join the stars in the heavens. Is there any kind of correlation there between the two?
I think there is, and there's another one of these linguistic coincidences. The Duat is the Egyptian underworld, and an underworld can be thought of as really an afterworld or an afterlife, and it doesn't have to be subterranean. It can be in the stars as well. But there's a Hopi word, Tuat. Basically the same word, and it means hallucination or something seen in a sacred manner or consciousness changed. If you're seeing with the Tuat, you're seeing in a kind of a hallucinatory way, and this might be a way to describe the afterlife or the journey through the afterlife. These creatures that you confront on your journey through this afterlife, they might seem like hallucinations to the material in the material sense, but I think it's very similar. The kinds of consciousness that's being evoked by the experience of traveling in this afterlife, in this journey world, that after death world.
That's a very interesting explication there, Gary, and I really appreciate that. We're about out of time right now, so I want to tell everybody once again that our guest this evening was Gary A. David, and you can find his website at theorionzone.com, and there are links on there for you to order the books that the material within we have been discussing today. And the three books are The Orion Zone, Eye of the Phoenix, and The Kivas of Heaven. And, of course, you can also get them at Adventures Unlimited Press, and you can get them at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, etc. But you can just go to his website, and there are links on there. There's a lot of other material on his website as well, which goes into a lot of the Hopi mythology. We talked about Masau and the correlation between Masau's appearance and the appearance of gray aliens. And also some other rather intriguing things about the ancient Native Americans of the American Southwest and connections with other cultures around the world. And also there's this idea of a world-spanning civilization, which seems to be the origin for a lot of very common features that we see around the world. And one that Gary has focused on very much is the idea of Orion being depicted in the earth. With the mesas in the southwest of the Hopis, and in Egypt on the Giza Plateau with the pyramids, and in many other places around the world. And he is working on trying to get some more evidence in this regard, and maybe we'll see some more work from him in the future. So thank you very much for joining us today, Gary. And I really enjoyed our discussion.
Well, thank you, Ted. I enjoyed it as well.
Okay, so maybe we'll have you on again in the future, and we'll talk some more about this because it's a really fascinating subject. So, okay, great. All right, thanks everybody for listening. Come back next week for another episode of the Stench of Truth, 7 to 9 p.m. on Friday. And right now, stay tuned for Bobby K's Rock and Roll Hour.